David rushed through the community center doors, checking his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. 6:35. He was already late, and the parking lot had been nearly full when he arrived. The whole place buzzed with activity, people moving in every direction, carrying boxes, bags, and supplies he couldn't identify from the doorway. He had promised his business partner he would show up to this thing. "It's good for the company image," Tom had said. "Plus, you need to get out more." David figured he could write a check, shake a few hands, and be back home in time to finish reviewing the Henderson project plans. Simple enough. The main hall was organized chaos. Tables stretched across the room, covered with piles of clothing, toiletries, canned goods, and what looked like hundreds of brown paper bags. Volunteers worked at each station, some sorting items while others packed bags with methodical precision. The noise level reminded him of a busy restaurant kitchen. "Are you here to help?" A woman appeared beside him, holding a clipboard and wearing a genuine smile that caught him off guard. She was probably in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and clothes that had clearly seen a full day of work. "Yes, I'm supposed to be volunteering," David said, suddenly aware that everyone around him seemed to know exactly what they were doing, while he stood there empty-handed. "I'm David Chen. I think I'm on some list." "Perfect timing. I'm Lisa." She glanced at her clipboard, made a quick check mark, then looked back at him. "Don't worry about being late. We can use all the help we can get tonight." She handed him a canvas apron from a nearby stack. "Have you done this before?" "Not exactly." He tied the apron strings, feeling slightly ridiculous.
"What exactly are we doing?"
"We're putting together care packages for the homeless veterans in our area. Each bag gets basic necessities plus a few comfort items." Lisa gestured toward the organized chaos around them. "The veterans come by tomorrow to pick them up, and we also hand them out during our weekly street outreach." She led him to a table where an elderly man and a teenage girl were efficiently packing bags. "Frank, Amy, this is David. Can you show him the system?" Frank looked up and nodded. "Sure thing. Each bag gets 3 canned items, 1 personal hygiene kit, socks, and a snack pack. Then we add 1 special item from that table over there." He pointed to a smaller table filled with books, small games, hand warmers, and other miscellaneous items. Amy, who couldn't have been older than 16, demonstrated the process with practiced ease. "It's like an assembly line, but more fun. You get to pick which special item you think someone might like." David settled into the rhythm, though his first few attempts were clumsy compared to his table partners. Frank had been volunteering here for 8 years, he learned, ever since he retired from teaching. Amy was here for school community service hours but had been coming back every month even after fulfilling her requirements. "Why do you keep coming back?" David asked Amy as they worked. She shrugged, focusing on her bag. "I don't know. It feels good, I guess. Like you're actually helping instead of just thinking about helping." As the evening progressed, David found himself paying attention to Lisa's interactions around the room. She seemed to float between tables, checking on progress but never in a micromanaging way. Instead, she asked about people's families, remembered details from previous conversations, and somehow kept track of supplies without appearing stressed. What really struck him was how she talked about the veterans who would receive these packages. She didn't use vague terms like the homeless or those people. Instead, she mentioned them by name. "Robert loves mystery novels, so save some of those paperbacks for his bag," she told volunteers at the book table. "And Maria's been trying to quit smoking, so she might appreciate those stress balls instead of the usual snacks." "You know all of them personally?" David asked when Lisa stopped by their table to refill their supply of hygiene kits. "Most of them, yes. They're not just faces in a crowd. They're neighbors." She arranged the kits in neat rows as she talked. Robert was a mechanic in the Army and still fixes bicycles for kids in the neighborhood when he can. Maria served 3 tours in Afghanistan and speaks 4 languages. "Each person has a whole life story, you know?" David nodded, though he realized he had never thought about it that way. In his world, homeless people were problems to be solved by city planners and social services, not individuals with names and personalities and skills. Around 8 o'clock, Lisa announced they were ahead of schedule. "We're doing great, everyone. Let's aim to finish the last 50 bags and then we can start cleanup." David had expected to leave hours ago but found himself surprisingly engaged in the work. There was something satisfying about the simple, repetitive task that let his mind relax in a way his usual analytical work never did. "First time volunteering?" Frank asked, noticing David's concentration. Yeah, I thought it would be different. Different how? David considered the question. I don't know. More depressing, maybe? More complicated, Frank chuckled. It's the simplest thing in the world, really. People need help, other people provide help. Everything else is just details. As they packed the final bags, David watched Lisa coordinate the cleanup with the same quiet efficiency she had shown all evening. She thanked each volunteer personally, not with generic appreciation, but with specific comments about their contributions. Amy, those bag arrangements you suggested really sped up our process tonight, she told the teenager. Frank, thank you for training our new volunteers. You have such a patient way of explaining things. When she reached David, he expected a polite thank you and dismissal. Instead, she paused and looked directly at him. I hope you'll consider coming back, she said. You have good instincts for this work. I noticed how carefully you selected the special items for each bag. David realized he had been doing that, though he hadn't consciously thought about it. Something about Frank's comment about Robert liking mystery novels had made him start imagining who might receive each bag he packed. I might do that, he heard himself saying, surprising himself with how much he meant it. Walking to his car later, David reflected on the unexpected turn his evening had taken. He had arrived planning to fulfill an obligation and leave. Instead, he had spent 3 hours absorbed in work that felt more meaningful than anything he had done in months. And it was entirely because of Lisa's approach to what could have been just another charity event. She had treated every person in that room, volunteer and recipient alike, as if they mattered individually. It was such a simple concept, but David realized how rarely he encountered it in his daily life. As he drove home, he found himself thinking about Robert and Maria and wondering what their stories were beyond the brief details Lisa had shared. For the first time in years, David felt genuinely curious about people he had never met, and that feeling stayed with him long after he reached his apartment. David found himself returning to the community center the following Tuesday evening. He told himself it was because he had some free time, but honestly, he couldn't stop thinking about the previous week's experience. There was something about Lisa's approach to helping people that had stuck with him. This time, the activity was different. Instead of packing care packages, volunteers were preparing a weekly dinner service. The center had been transformed into a makeshift dining room with round tables covered in cheerful tablecloths. The kitchen buzzed with people preparing what smelled like a proper home-cooked meal. David, you came back, Lisa called out from behind the serving counter, her face lighting up with genuine pleasure. That's wonderful. Can you help me set up the beverage station? As they arranged pitchers of water and coffee, David noticed Lisa looked tired. Not just end-of-the-day tired, but deeply exhausted in a way that suggested she had been running on too little sleep for too long. Busy day? He asked as they worked. They're all busy days, she replied with a laugh that didn't quite hide the weariness. But that's okay. Busy means people are getting help. The dinner service began at 6, and David watched the transformation that occurred as the veterans arrived. Men and women of various ages filed in, some chatting easily with volunteers, others more reserved. What struck David was how Lisa greeted each person individually. Hey, Robert, how did that job interview go yesterday? She asked a man in his 50s wearing a carefully maintained but worn jacket. Robert's face broke into a smile. Got it. Start Monday morning at the garage on 5th Street. That's incredible. Lisa's excitement was completely genuine. She actually clapped her hands together. I knew your mechanical skills would win them over. Are you nervous? A little. Haven't had steady work in 2 years. You're going to do great. And remember, if you need anything for the first week, we're here. David found himself assigned to serve vegetables, which gave him a perfect view of these interactions. Over the course of the evening, he witnessed conversation after conversation where Lisa demonstrated detailed knowledge of each person's situation. She asked Maria about her daughter's graduation from community college. She inquired about Tom's progress with his PTSD counselor. She remembered that Janet was waiting to hear about housing assistance and made a note to follow up on her application. How does she remember all of this? David asked Frank, who was serving beside him. She keeps notes, Frank said, nodding toward a small notebook Lisa occasionally consulted. But mostly she just genuinely cares. When you really care about people, you remember things about them. During a brief lull in the serving line, David overheard Lisa on the phone near the kitchen. She was speaking quietly, but he caught fragments of the conversation. Yes, Mom, I'll be home by 9. No, don't try to make dinner, I'll bring something. Did you take your evening medication? Okay, I wrote it on the calendar in the kitchen. Yes, the red pills. The call lasted several minutes with Lisa patiently repeating information and reassuring the person on the other end. When she hung up, she took a deep breath before returning to the serving area with her usual smile firmly in place. Later, as volunteers cleaned up, David found himself working alongside Lisa to wipe down tables. Is everything okay at home? He asked gently. Lisa paused in her cleaning. My mom has dementia. Some days are better than others. She resumed wiping the table with focused concentration. She gets confused in the evening, so I try to keep my volunteer shifts to times when she's usually napping or more settled. That must be incredibly difficult. It is what it is, Lisa said matter-of-factly. She took care of me for 18 years. Now it's my turn. David wanted to ask more questions, but something in Lisa's tone suggested she didn't want to dwell on the topic. Instead, he focused on helping finish the cleanup efficiently so she could get home to her mother. Over the following weeks, David became a regular volunteer. He started to piece together more of Lisa's story through casual observations and conversations with other volunteers. She worked at a medical supply company during the day, cleaned offices 3 evenings a week, and attended nursing school classes on Saturday mornings. Somehow she also managed to volunteer at the center twice a week and coordinate their monthly outreach events. When does she sleep? David asked Amy one evening. I don't think she does much, Amy replied. My mom works with her at the medical supply place. She says Lisa's always the first one there in the morning and stays late to help cover shifts when other people call in sick. Despite her overwhelming schedule, Lisa never seemed to rush through her interactions with the veterans. David watched her spend 20 minutes listening to a man named Carlos talk about his struggles with anxiety. She didn't offer quick fixes or empty reassurances. Instead, she asked thoughtful questions and shared resources that might help. Have you heard of the breathing technique Dr. Williams taught in last month's workshop? She asked Carlos. I have some handouts in my bag if you think that might help. Another evening, Lisa spent her entire dinner break helping a woman named Patricia fill out job applications on the center's computer. Patricia struggled with reading, and Lisa patiently helped her navigate the online forms without ever making her feel embarrassed about needing assistance. What amazed David was Lisa's genuine joy when good things happened to the people she served. When Robert got his first paycheck from the garage job, Lisa celebrated as enthusiastically as if she had gotten the job herself. When Maria's daughter invited her to move in temporarily, Lisa actually teared up with happiness. I don't understand how you do it, David told her one evening as they stacked chairs after the dinner service. Do what? Care this much about so many people? Doesn't it exhaust you emotionally? Lisa considered the question seriously. Sometimes it's overwhelming, she admitted. But these relationships give me energy too. When Robert succeeds, I succeed. When Maria finds stable housing, I feel like I've won something important. She paused in her chair, stacking. I think caring about people is like exercising a muscle. The more you do it, the stronger you get. And the stronger you get, the more you can handle. David found himself thinking about that conversation for days afterward. In his professional life, he was used to measuring success in terms of completed projects and satisfied clients. But Lisa measured success in terms of human flourishing, and her capacity for that seemed endless. One evening, as David was leaving the center, he saw Lisa in the parking lot loading her car with leftover food from the dinner service. Taking some home? He asked. Actually, I'm dropping this off at 3 different locations on my way home, she explained. There are some folks who can't make it to the center but still need meals. It's not official outreach, just something I started doing. As David drove home that night, he realized he had never met anyone like Lisa. In his world, people helped others when it was convenient, when it served their interests, or when they had extra time and resources. Lisa helped people when it was inconvenient, when she had no extra time, and when she was running on empty herself. More than that, she seemed to genuinely believe that every person she encountered had inherent worth and potential. It wasn't an abstract philosophical position for her. It was the practical foundation of how she lived her life. For the first time in years, David felt like he was learning something important about what it meant to be human. David noticed something was different about Lisa on a cold Thursday evening in February. She still greeted everyone with her usual warmth, but there was a tightness around her eyes that hadn't been there before. When she thought no one was looking, her shoulders sagged with exhaustion that went beyond her typical tiredness. The community center felt different too. The old heating system had been struggling for weeks, making strange noises and providing uneven warmth. Tonight it seemed to have given up entirely. David could see his breath as he helped set up the dinner tables, and several of the older veterans were keeping their coats on. The repair estimate came back today, Frank told David quietly as they arranged chairs. $12,000 to replace the whole system. The center doesn't have that kind of money in the budget. Lisa appeared with an armload of blankets from somewhere in the building. I found these in the storage room, she announced cheerfully. Let's make sure everyone stays warm while they eat. She distributed the blankets to the veterans as they arrived, making light conversation about the cold snap while ensuring each person was comfortable. David watched her crouch down to wrap a blanket around the shoulders of an elderly woman named Dorothy, taking extra time to tuck it securely around her. This is much better than sleeping outside, Dorothy said gratefully. At least we have walls and a roof. That's right, Lisa agreed. And tomorrow I'm bringing some portable heaters to help until we figure out the heating situation. David overheard this and wondered where Lisa would get portable heaters. The conversation stuck with him through dinner service and cleanup. As volunteers said their goodbyes, he lingered to help Lisa with the final tasks. About those heaters, he said as they wiped down the last table. That's going to be expensive. Are you planning to rent them? Lisa focused intently on a stubborn spot on the table. I found some good deals online. Don't worry about it. Lisa, you don't need to buy heaters for the whole center. Let me help with the cost. I appreciate the offer, I really do, but I've got it covered. Something in her tone told David not to push the issue, but he couldn't shake the feeling that she was taking on too much. The next evening, David arrived early to find Lisa already there, setting up 3 space heaters around the dining area. They looked brand new, still in their boxes when he had walked in. She was carefully positioning them for maximum warmth coverage. These work great, she said when she saw him. The temperature should be much more comfortable tonight. Over the following weeks, David began to notice other small changes in Lisa's routine. She started declining invitations from other volunteers to grab coffee after their shifts. When the group talked about going out for dinner to celebrate Amy's birthday, Lisa politely said she was watching her budget right now. At first, David assumed she was just being cautious with money, something he understood. But then he started observing more carefully. Lisa's lunches went from proper meals to simple sandwiches she brought from home. Her car, which had always been modest but well-maintained, developed a squeaking brake sound that she ignored. Most telling was the phone call David accidentally overheard one evening when he returned to the center to retrieve his forgotten keys. Lisa was in the office, speaking in hushed tones. I understand the payment is late, she was saying. Can we work out a payment plan? I can give you half now and half next month. Yes, I know we discussed this before. I'm doing everything I can. David quietly retrieved his keys and left without interrupting, but the conversation troubled him. Combined with Lisa's recent behavior, it painted a picture of someone under serious financial strain. His suspicions were confirmed the following week when he saw Lisa carrying a box to her car after their volunteer session. Through the transparent plastic, he could see books, a small television, and what looked like jewelry. Spring cleaning? He asked casually. Something like that, Lisa replied, loading the box carefully into her trunk. The next Tuesday, David noticed Lisa seemed particularly drained. She moved more slowly than usual and seemed to be fighting off a headache. During their break, he saw her checking her phone repeatedly, her expression growing more worried each time. Everything okay? He asked. Lisa looked up, seeming to realize she was being obvious about her distraction. Mom had a small medical incident yesterday. We're waiting on some test results. Is she okay? The doctors think so. It's just... Lisa paused, seeming to weigh how much to share. Insurance doesn't cover everything, but we'll figure it out. David wanted to press for more details to offer help, but he was learning that Lisa had boundaries around accepting assistance. Instead, he focused on making the evening's volunteer work as smooth as possible, taking on extra tasks so she could concentrate on other things. 3 weeks later, David arrived at the center to find Lisa already there at 5 in the afternoon, 2 hours before their usual start time. She was mopping the floors with methodical precision. "You're here early," he observed. "I picked up some extra cleaning shifts," she explained without looking up from her work. "The center lets me do it before our regular volunteer hours." David did quick math in his head. If Lisa was working her day job, her evening cleaning jobs, attending weekend nursing school, and now adding afternoon cleaning shifts, she was working nearly every waking hour. "Lisa, this is too much. You're going to burn yourself out." She paused in her mopping and gave him a tired smile. "I'm tougher than I look. Besides, it's temporary, just until we get caught up on some expenses." That evening, David made a decision. After the dinner service, he approached Lisa with an envelope. "I want you to take this," he said, holding out what was clearly a check. Lisa didn't even look at the envelope. "David, no. I appreciate the thought, but I can't accept money from you." "Why not? You help people every day. Let someone help you for once." Lisa set down the serving spoon she was washing and turned to face him fully. "Because accepting charity would change who I am in this space. The people we serve trust me because they know I'm here for the right reasons. If I start accepting money from volunteers, it becomes something different. That's ridiculous. Taking help when you need it doesn't compromise your integrity." "Maybe not," Lisa agreed. "But it would compromise my ability to serve others authentically. These relationships work because they're based on mutual respect, not pity or obligation." David felt frustrated by what seemed like stubborn pride, but something in Lisa's calm explanation made him reconsider. She wasn't refusing help because she was too proud. She was refusing it because she understood something about human dignity that he was still learning. "What if it wasn't charity?" he pressed. "What if you let me contribute to the heating fund, or sponsor some of the dinner costs?" Lisa considered this for a moment. "That would be different. You'd be supporting the center, not me personally." She paused. "But David, I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this work because I have to. I'm doing it because I choose to. The fact that it's sometimes difficult doesn't mean I need rescuing." As David drove home that night, he found himself thinking about Lisa's distinction between helping the center and helping her personally. On the surface, it seemed like an arbitrary line, but the more he considered it, the more he understood her point. Lisa's effectiveness came from her ability to meet people as equals. Her credibility with the veterans stemmed from their recognition that she genuinely cared, not that she was performing charity work from a position of privilege. Accepting personal, financial help might not change her intentions, but it could change how others perceived her relationships with them. For the first time, David realized that Lisa's approach to helping others was more sophisticated than he had initially understood. She wasn't just kind and hardworking. She was thoughtful about the dynamics of human dignity in ways that challenged everything he thought he knew about charity and service. The evening started like any other Tuesday at the community center. David was helping Lisa arrange the dinner tables when they heard raised voices from near the entrance. At first, it seemed like a normal disagreement between two people, but the tone quickly shifted to something more serious. "I said back off. Don't tell me what I need." The voice belonged to Kevin, a veteran in his 40s who usually kept to himself during dinner service. He had been coming to the center for about 6 months, but David had never heard him speak above a whisper. Kevin was standing in the center of the room, his whole body tense and shaking. His eyes darted around frantically as if he was seeing threats that weren't there. The other veterans and volunteers had instinctively moved back, creating a wide circle around him. "Kevin, it's okay," Frank said gently from several feet away. "Nobody's trying to hurt you. You're safe here." But Kevin didn't seem to hear him. His breathing was rapid and shallow, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool temperature in the room. "They're coming through the walls," he said, his voice barely controlled. "Can't you hear them? They're right there." David felt his own anxiety spike as he watched the situation unfold. Several other volunteers looked frightened and uncertain about what to do. Even Frank, with all his experience, seemed hesitant to approach Kevin directly. That's when Lisa stepped forward. She didn't rush toward Kevin or make any sudden movements. Instead, she walked slowly and deliberately, her hands visible at her sides. When she was about 8 feet away from him, she sat down on the floor, making herself smaller and less threatening. "Kevin," she said in a voice that was calm, but carried clearly across the room. "My name is Lisa. You know me from dinner service. I'm going to stay right here with you." Kevin's wild eyes focused on her for a moment, but he was still clearly not present in the room with them. "They won't stop," he said. "The noise, the explosions, they're everywhere." Lisa nodded as if she completely understood. "I know about the noise," she said quietly. "My father used to hear it too. He served in Vietnam, and sometimes the sounds from over there followed him home." Something in her tone seemed to reach Kevin. His frantic movements slowed slightly, though his breathing was still labored. "The thing about those sounds," Lisa continued, still sitting calmly on the floor, "is that they feel real even when they're not happening right now. Dad used to tell me it was like his mind got stuck in those moments overseas, and his body forgot it was safe at home." David watched in amazement as Lisa continued talking in that same steady, understanding voice. She wasn't trying to convince Kevin that his experience wasn't real. Instead, she was acknowledging what he was going through while gently anchoring him to the present moment. "Kevin, can you feel the floor under your feet?" she asked. "It's solid concrete. We're in the community center on Maple Street. It's Tuesday evening and we're getting ready to serve dinner. You came in about 10 minutes ago wearing your blue jacket." Kevin looked down at his jacket, touching the fabric as if to confirm its reality. "That's right," Lisa said encouragingly. "That's your jacket. You're Kevin, and you're here with people who care about you. The sounds you're hearing happened in a different place, at a different time. Right now, in this moment, you're safe." Gradually, Kevin's breathing began to slow. The wild look in his eyes started to fade, replaced by confusion and embarrassment. "I'm sorry," he whispered, looking around at the circle of concerned faces. "I didn't mean to scare anyone. You have nothing to apologize for," Lisa said firmly, still sitting on the floor but scooting a little closer to him. "What just happened wasn't your fault. Sometimes our minds try to protect us from danger that isn't actually there anymore." She gestured to an empty chair near where she was sitting. "Would you like to sit down for a few minutes? We don't have to talk about it if you don't want to." Kevin nodded and sank into the chair, his whole body seeming to deflate with exhaustion. Lisa stayed on the floor next to him, creating a calm bubble in what had been a chaotic scene just minutes before. "How did you know what to do?" Kevin asked quietly. Lisa was silent for a moment, and David could see her weighing how much to share. "My dad struggled with similar episodes after he came back from the war. It took us years to understand what was happening and how to help him through them." "Did it get better?" Kevin asked hopefully. Lisa's expression grew sad, but she maintained her gentle composure. "We learned to manage them better. Dad and I developed strategies that helped him feel more grounded when his mind got stuck in those difficult memories. He lived with it for 30 years before he passed away." The room had grown very quiet. David realized that everyone present was witnessing something profound, though he wasn't sure he fully understood what it was yet. "Would you like me to call someone for you?" Lisa asked Kevin. "A family member or friend?" Kevin shook his head. "Don't have anybody close by. That's part of the problem, I think." Lisa nodded understandingly. "Would it be okay if I sat with you while you eat dinner? You don't have to talk if you don't want to. Sometimes it just helps to have someone nearby who understands." As Kevin agreed and the normal dinner service slowly resumed around them, David found himself studying Lisa with new eyes. He had watched her handle the crisis with incredible skill and compassion, but it was more than that. She had drawn on her own painful experiences to help someone else, transforming her personal loss into a tool for healing. Later, after Kevin had eaten and left the center with phone numbers for crisis counselors and a promise to return next week, David helped Lisa clean up. Most of the other volunteers had already gone home, leaving them alone in the quiet. "Building. That was incredible what you did tonight," David said as they stacked chairs. Lisa paused in her work. "It wasn't incredible. It was just necessary. But the way you knew exactly what to say, how to approach him, where did you learn that?" Lisa resumed stacking chairs, but David could see she was choosing her words carefully. "When someone you love is suffering, you learn. You pay attention to what helps and what makes things worse. You read everything you can find. You make mistakes and try to do better next time. She finished with one stack and moved to the next table. Dad had his first severe episode when I was 12. Mom didn't know what to do, so it became my job to figure out how to help him. I learned to recognize the warning signs, the triggers, the things that could bring him back to the present moment. David stopped his own cleaning and looked at her directly. That's a huge responsibility for a 12-year-old. It was what it was, Lisa said simply. Dad couldn't help having flashbacks any more than Kevin could help having one tonight. And I couldn't help loving my father enough to want to ease his suffering. The quiet strength in her voice made David's chest tighten with emotion. He was beginning to understand that Lisa's remarkable ability to help others wasn't just natural talent or good intentions. It was strength forged through years of loving someone who was in pain and refusing to give up on them. "Is that why you're studying nursing?" he asked. "Partly. After Dad died, I realized I wanted to help other families navigate what we went through. There are so many people suffering in silence because they don't know how to ask for help, or because they're ashamed of needing it." As they finished cleaning and turned off the lights, David reflected on everything he had witnessed that evening. Lisa's calm response to Kevin's crisis hadn't been the result of textbook training or professional distance. It had been born from love, loss, and the hard-won wisdom that comes from walking through darkness with someone you care about. For the first time, David understood that Lisa's kindness wasn't naive optimism or natural talent. It was courage. The courage to remain open-hearted despite knowing how much pain the world could hold. The community center looked completely different on the night of their annual appreciation dinner. Someone had strung lights across the ceiling, and the usual folding tables were covered with real tablecloths and centerpieces made of fresh flowers. David barely recognized the space where he had spent so many evenings serving meals and packing care packages. He adjusted his tie as he walked in, feeling slightly overdressed compared to his usual volunteer uniform of jeans and a comfortable shirt. The evening was meant to celebrate all the volunteers who had contributed to the center's work over the past year. And apparently, that called for something more formal than their typical gatherings. Lisa was already there, wearing a simple dark blue dress that David had never seen before. She was moving between tables, greeting people and making sure everyone felt welcomed. Even at her own appreciation event, she was taking care of others. "David, you clean up well," Frank said, appearing beside him with a broad smile. "Hard to believe it's been 8 months since your first night here." 8 months, David repeated, surprised by how quickly the time had passed. "It feels like yesterday and forever ago at the same time." The evening began with dinner, and David found himself seated at a table with Amy, Frank, and several other regular volunteers. The conversation flowed easily, filled with shared stories from their nights at the center. Everyone had a favorite memory or a moment that had particularly touched them. "Remember when Robert got that job at the garage?" Amy said. Lisa was so excited she actually jumped up and down. "Or when Maria's daughter graduated from college," Frank added. Lisa cried harder than Maria did. As they talked, David realized how much these weekly gatherings had become part of his life. What had started as a single evening of obligation had grown into something he genuinely looked forward to. The work had changed him in ways he was still discovering. After dinner, the center's director stood up to address the room. "Tonight is about recognizing the incredible volunteers who make our work possible," she began. "But first, I want to acknowledge someone whose contribution goes far beyond the hours she logs." David immediately knew she was talking about Lisa, though Lisa herself looked surprised by the attention. "This person coordinates our weekly dinners, organizes our outreach efforts, and somehow manages to know every single person who walks through our doors. She's here early, stays late, and treats every person she encounters with genuine dignity and respect." The director paused, looking directly at Lisa. "Lisa Chen, would you please come up here? You've been selected as this year's Volunteer of the Year." The room erupted in applause as Lisa made her way to the front, looking genuinely shocked by the recognition. David found himself clapping harder than he had in years, his chest tight with emotion he couldn't quite name. Lisa accepted a small plaque and stood at the microphone, clearly unprepared for this moment. David expected her to give a brief, humble thank you and return to her seat. Instead, after a moment of collecting herself, she began to speak in that same clear, steady voice he had come to know so well. "I'm honored by this recognition, but I need to tell you something. I'm not here tonight because I'm particularly good at volunteer work. I'm here because this place and these people have saved my life in ways I'm still discovering." She paused, looking out at the faces in the audience. "When I first started coming to the center 3 years ago, I was drowning. My father had just passed away after a long struggle with PTSD. My mother was beginning to show signs of dementia, and I felt completely alone in the world." David felt his breath catch. He had known pieces of Lisa's story, but never the full picture of what had brought her to the center. "I came here originally because I needed something to do with my grief. I thought helping others might distract me from my own pain. What I discovered was something completely different." Lisa's eyes found Frank in the audience. "Frank, that first night you taught me how to pack care packages. But more than that, you showed me that taking care of people could be joyful instead of just exhausting. You made me remember that service doesn't have to feel like sacrifice." Frank wiped his eyes, clearly moved by being recognized. Lisa continued, her gaze moving around the room. "Amy, your enthusiasm reminds me every week that helping others isn't just about duty. It's about connection and hope. Watching you light up when someone finds housing or gets a job keeps me going on my hardest days." David watched Amy beam with pride and surprise at being mentioned. "Robert, when you shared your mechanical skills to fix that wheelchair last month, you reminded me that everyone here has something valuable to offer. You're not just someone who receives help. You're someone who gives it too." Lisa's voice grew stronger as she continued. "Maria, your strength in rebuilding your life after losing your home showed me what resilience really looks like. Patricia, your determination to learn to read at age 55 taught me that it's never too late to grow. Kevin, your courage in facing your struggles head-on inspires me every single week." David realized that Lisa was going through the room, acknowledging nearly every person present by name. She wasn't giving a generic speech about volunteering. She was sharing specific ways that each person had impacted her life. "And David," Lisa said, her eyes finding his across the room, "your quiet consistency has anchored so many difficult evenings. You show up, you work hard, and you treat everyone with respect. You listen more than you talk. And you've taught me that sometimes the most powerful way to help someone is simply to be present with them." David felt heat rise in his cheeks as every head in the room turned toward him. He had never considered himself particularly impactful in the center's work, but Lisa's words suggested otherwise. Lisa's voice grew softer as she reached the conclusion of her remarks. "Here's what I need you all to understand. Every single person in this room has taught me something essential about what it means to be human. You've shown me that kindness isn't weakness, that vulnerability isn't something to hide, and that caring about others doesn't diminish you, it expands you." She paused, and David could see tears gathering in her eyes. "I came here 3 years ago broken and afraid that I had nothing left to give. You all taught me that giving isn't about having extra resources or time or energy. Giving is about showing up as you are and trusting that your presence matters to someone else." The room had grown completely silent. David could hear his own heartbeat as Lisa continued. "So this award isn't really mine. It belongs to all of us because we've created something here that's bigger than any individual contribution. We've created a community where people's worth isn't determined by their circumstances, where everyone has something to offer and where showing up for each other is just what we do." Lisa smiled through her tears. "The people we serve here haven't just received help from us. They've given us the opportunity to remember what we're capable of when we choose love over fear, connection over isolation, and hope over despair. That's a gift I'll never be able to repay." As Lisa returned to her seat to thunderous applause, David found himself unable to clap, unable to speak, unable to do anything but sit in stunned silence. He had expected a polite thank you speech. Instead, he had witnessed something that felt like a revelation about the nature of human goodness. For 8 months, he had admired Lisa's kindness and dedication. Tonight, he understood that what he had been witnessing wasn't just exceptional volunteer work. It was a masterclass in how to live as a human being, how to transform pain into purpose, how to find strength in vulnerability, and how to see every person as worthy of dignity and respect. David remained silent long after the applause died down, long after the evening's activities resumed, long after people began saying their goodbyes. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, he was truly speechless, not from shock or confusion, but from recognizing that he had just witnessed something profound about what people could become when they chose to live with courage and authentic love for others. That night changed. Everything he thought he knew about strength, kindness, and what it meant to make a difference in the world.